Without a large-scale perspective, world events can make an individual extremely discouraged. Even with such a perspective, it is a continuing battle to stave off depression, stemming from external situations over which the individual has little or no control. With that in mind, I'd like to revisit a topic I touched on quite a while back. It concerns the overall development of civilization and an assessment of who actually controls what and to what extent. Drawing out a timeline from, say, 100,000 years back, and projecting to 100,000 years into the future, we can say with confidence that we are transitioning from animal to man. And we do so asymptotically. That is, we never quite achieve the fullness of being man, but we approach it at an ever-slowing rate. Going backward in time, the opposite is true. We approach complete animal nature, more or less asymptotically as well. If the foregoing is true, then by geometric necessity, there will be a point of inflection along a plotted track of development where the rate of development changes from accelerating progress to a slowing of that progress. This is necessary because the limits of animal and man define a finite distance, and that transition must be finite because our development is inevitably constrained by the laws of physics, whatever they may finally turn out to be. There must then be two other points of interest besides the point of inflection, these being the two short radii. These are the points where the radius of curvature is least. My personal conjecture is that we are just about at the first short radius. This point would ostensibly mark the beginning of the most rapid development toward achieving the status of true man. It means that despite the apparent dire straits we seem to be in, regarding the New World Order, bankster conspiracy, and other weighty subjects, we can expect to get past this and experience what can only be described as a historical thrill ride. That is, after we get past the present difficulties, life in general will become exceedingly rich, exciting, and fulfilling. The time between the two short radii could be a century or a millennium. There is no way to know. But it should be lots of fun for those living within it. On the other hand, we may be just entering a spike in the timeline, and the true first short radius may be thousands of years off in the future. Although I've drawn a smooth curve, the actual state of things just adds up to a fairly smooth curve. In this location or that, there may be wild fluctuations caused by war, disease, famine, earthquakes, etc. I've compared it to the developing current in a wire. When you turn on the juice, the flow of current induces its own resistance, and there is a lot of chaos within the wire till a steady current flow establishes itself. I think this analogy is extremely accurate. Once the current is turned on, of necessity, it will overcome any obstacle and finally flow steadily. Or you could get a short and the wire could burn out. A total nuclear war would be the equivalent to such a short circuit. The length of time where there is noticeable progress toward the goal of becoming true man can be called history. History is the chronicle of change on the way to achieving fullness of being. Where there is no noticeable progress, there is no history. Where the line is close to flat, no one would notice much of a change over the span of a lifetime. The age where change is noticeable I call human, which means that which is like a man, but not quite a man. So there are three basic phases to our development: the age of animal, the age of human, and the age of man. The age of human is the shortest. From the long perspective, it's something like flipping a switch and the light comes on. Off is animal, on is man. The switching phase is human. This is why the aliens don't do anything to help us. They've been around perhaps for a few 100 million years, and probably have had cities on the earth. From their multi-million-year perspective, there is simply nothing wrong with the earth. What we are experiencing is completely normal, and every nascent planet undergoes the same birth pangs. Of necessity, it's messy. They are our obstetricians overseeing a natural childbirth. The aliens are not participants in the who's in charge hierarchy. They are just observing and won't intervene unless there is the equivalent of a breech birth or something of that sort. And you can be sure that they've already covered every conceivable issue, so there's no problem on the birth front. Some conjecture with good cause that evil men are at the top of the present hierarchy of rulers on earth. This thesis raises the question of whether their bad influence is causal, congruent, or coincidental. By causal, I mean that if they were not around, we would be in a state of bliss, since they alone are the true cause of our misfortunes. By congruent, I mean that if the present rulers were suddenly to disappear, we would not achieve bliss, but would see them replaced by new evildoers. This in turn means that the true cause of our misfortune lies elsewhere than in our oppressors. By coincidental, I mean that the evildoers have nothing to do with our predicament, and merely claim causal connection to elicit fear and obedience in their victims. By way of crude example, if a toboggan were sliding downhill, the evildoers would run alongside, putting hands on the shoulders of the riders, while laying claim to being the motive force of the descent. But clearly, gravity is the mover, and the evildoers merely lay claim to a power they do not truly possess. My best guess is that the evildoers are congruent with the descent. They are the vessels used by another entity to effect the decay of civilization. That entity should be what people call God, and I grant that this is conjecture on my part. But if the mind of man is the phase-space construct congruent with the machinations of the physical brain, then there must be a phase-space entity associated with the machinations of all the individuals in civilization, who are all connected, just as are the parts of your brain. We are each then a complex node in the mind of God. The purpose of that being may be a form of self-improvement. Thus, as we approach the state of true man, God congruently approaches his personal goal of achieving the fullness of being himself. In other words, test the individual beings, toss out the dross, and save the souls of their betters for reuse. Thus, as civilization improves, God improves. Congruent with all this would be physical analogs. The accumulation and integration of knowledge by man proceeds as a Maxwellian-type distribution with a quantity of knowledge on the y-axis and time on the x-axis. The area under curve is the totality that can be learned. I mean here general concepts, not individual bits of specific discrete information. There is also a Gaussian parameter which causes an oscillation when humanity is dragged through a resistance. When wind flows over a flag, the flag waves. It oscillates. A stick held in a running stream will oscillate right and left. This is a general rule of physics and has analog in history. As we are dragged through time, our civilizations rise and fall with a periodicity on the order of a couple centuries. This is the source cause of everything happening on Earth. All the other proposed causes are the congruencies that are the necessary embodiment of the ordered principles of accumulation and periodicity, superimposed on one another and existing in the context of a sea of randomness. Thus, the true picture of the Earth's overall development will look something like this. And so must be true of every other planet in the galaxy as well. Our development, though trying, is not unique.